welcome to your Wednesday dose of wealth wisdom on Thursday, because I tried to edit it and it went horrifically wrong, so I'm redoing it. Today's subject, which is episode 30, that means we've been going for 30 weeks, hopefully full of content and lots of value, is HMOs, how to do it right. So I'm going to share it to a few places, allow some of you fabulous people to join me here in this illustrious day. Share on my timeline. Boom. Nipped. Share to a group. Yeah, it's not been really great to edit these Facebook videos. I really ballsed it up, so that's why I'm doing it again today. Right, let's share to the places that I want it to be shared. So let's begin. Hello and welcome to your Wednesday dose of wealth wisdom with me, Daniel Kennedy, your host. Hope you're having a wonderful day and you're making use of the heat. Episode 30 today, and the subject is HMO rules on how to do it right. So HMOs, for those of you who don't know, are houses of multiple occupancy. That means when two households, a household can be two people, it can be a husband and wife, it can be a single person, it can be a family. You wouldn't tend to mix the tenant types, but let's just go, for example, three people don't know each other, they're three separate households. They share one property. That means that house is a HMO. And if your intention is to make it a HMO from the beginning, something is required, and it's a conversion. So a family home, it comes under the class C3. And when you go to C4, you're changing the use, and that's under permitted development. And a real big shock for me is that I've spoken to many people and some real sort of like big players in the local industry. Some people out there are not doing building regs for their conversions. And some mortgage companies, providers are allowing this to happen. And when you go from C3 to C4, it's a change of use. Although under permitted development, you still require building regs. You need to plan for the worst with HMOs. And imagine if you want to sell. So if you want to sell and your buyer is using a mortgage provider, so for us, Interbay, they require building regs when we exit their bridge onto their long-term commercial product, even if it doesn't require a license. So we've got a 4-bed that doesn't require a license, but it still requires building regs because it's change of use. And what if there are no structural works? Does it still need building regs? Absolutely. Again, because it's change of use. So what can your building rep come and look at? They'll come and look at and they'll make sure the fire alarm is in place. That's typically what my approved inspector looks at. They make sure that all the fire door frames are up to spec. And then you can also, once you get that signed off, you can get that notarized because fire doors are a big one if they're not done properly. They can make sure that the property room sizes, if they're educated, some aren't, some are up to spec. And also they'll advise on various measures. So for us, we're changing the windows. So we have to liaise via the conservation officer and the approved building inspector. And because there's precedent in the street, we're able to get mock sash, which is fantastic. So that's one rule. No matter how small your HMO is, you need to get building regs. I know it's a pain, but how you do anything is how you do everything. And that's why you need to do it. It doesn't cost much. It costs you maybe 700 quid. But then what you're doing is you're future-proofing your HMO, because if it goes wrong and you don't fancy it, you can then sell it. And if somebody is trying to purchase it, like myself, and I use Interbay primarily, they would require building regs. So it helps you to sell. I'm not saying you can't refinance. You're maybe in a bit of a gray area there. But because the person who I spoke to, who I won't name, hasn't been doing building regs, and he's been developing for other people, I might add. So it needs to really, really, really change his practices very quickly. Because if you're doing it for other people, there's no excuse. You should be in the know. The excuse, I don't know, isn't good enough. So hopefully that person will now change their practices. So that's a big one. So many people, and renters as well, you need to do it. Because again, I've yet to meet any renter who's done it properly. no building regs, usually on the wrong mortgage product, and also no planning as well I've come across. So building regs, that's number one. Regardless of how small or big, you need to get it done. Even if there's no structural works. If you're changing door frames, that still needs to get signed off. If you're putting in fire alarms, that still needs to get signed off. So when you occupy your HMO, and for example, you're doing a license, even if it's not licensed, you still need to do a floor plan, because you have to do something called a fire risk assessment. And if you judging from the NLA's template, which is fantastic, everyone needs to do them. Some people pay other outside agencies to come and do it. Me personally, we got a fabulous liaison officer at the local fire brigade, and they will help me write it. So they come out, they look at the property, and they say, right, that's good, this door needs changing, etc. They've said that in the past. And then they make me write a floor plan with the measurements, and then I have to do like a fire escape route. And one thing that they always harp on about is you have to make your fire escape routes clear of obstacles, put that down as a risk, and that it gets actively monitored. Make sure that it's clear, have it in the tenancy, have it in the AST, make sure the tenants know that it's there. Make sure the whole length of the escape route is fireproof, so fire doors on any exits till the outside. Make sure that they're all compliant. Sometimes, if it's a loft conversion, they'll make you put fireboards, so the pink plaster boards. Again, this is something that the building control might also enforce. So you need, again, so number one, building regs. Number two, make sure you get your fire risk assessment. Don't just do it on your own. What you need to do, it says that you can, but my advice, we're not experts. Maybe one or two of you out there are, but get someone who deals with this day in, day out, get their advice, because they'll be able to advise you. And if ever it goes to court, you can say, I sought professional advice. Here's where I mitigated the risks that were raised. And then following on from that, your HMOs need to get tested each week. So how we do it is we have, say there's a 20 smoke alarms. One will get tested and it gets ticked off the list, and that won't get tested until we've tested every single one. And every 6 months, you have to get a professional in, or every year, depending on the area, to test the fire alarm, test the emergency lights, and give you a certificate. Excuse me. So make sure you're up to scratch with your fire regulations, so that you need a fire risk assessment, and that needs to include, well, it doesn't need to because everyone's a little bit different, but I'll tell you what our one includes. It includes the way to escape the building. It includes the risks and how they're mitigated. And it also includes when they're tested, the fire alarm and so on. But everyone does the fire alarm bit because you're meant to. Okay, number three. When you're putting tenants into a property for HMO, although HMOs are EPC exempt, you still want to show them the EPC and have that evidenced. Because if you don't, you may run into problems if the tenant becomes a bit of a pain and you need to evict them. So you need to evidence the fact that they saw the EPC, even though they're not paying bills, most of the case, have like a little tick sheet where they say, yep, I saw the EPC, so I could make an informed decision that I wanted this property. Just do it. It's best practice, and it will help you if you need to evict them. Then, when they're signing the AST, get them to sign the AST, register the deposit. When they take occupancy of the building, there's a few things that you need to do. You need to test the fire alarm in front of them. So we have this smoke thing. You can pick them up anywhere, and it'll set off the smoke alarm. It's really simple. Then go reset it, then tick, and then get them to sign to say, I have seen the fire alarm tested in my presence upon occupancy of the room. Also, you need to show them the gas safety cert, if applicable. If it's electric, obviously you don't. You need to show them that the HMO license. You need to give them, so here's a lesson for you. You need to give them a how to rent, but that we printed them off on our board and said, there it is, go and have a look. But it changes so often, it's become a bit of a pain in the ass. So what we do, we have one copy. We say, there's a copy. Do you want to read it? Sign that you've read it. And then normally on the next day, it'll be on the kitchen table. So we retrieve it just to save a bit of paper, and it goes to the next tenant. You need to have your HMO license on display. Show them where it is. So every HMO should have a board, and a few things should be on the board. So we put the guide to living as well, that a fellow landlord wrote, and it's a fantastic document. which is the house rules, which is tweaked a bit for our HMOs, the gas safety cert, the fire alarm, the emergency lights, the what's the third one? The ECIR, which needs to get done every 5 years. And like, if you can't sprout this off from memory, then you need more education. You need to go to the RLA or NLA and learn this, because there's no excuse of when you apply for a HMO license, you're meant to know every single thing, and you have to state that I am a competent person in managing these HMOs. Because the days of asking for forgiveness because you don't know are over, because there's so many resources out there to us for free, most of them as well. Some you pay for, some you don't. Like, this is a free resource now. You could listen, learn, and then go and get the documents. So again, building regs. Number 2, fire risk assessments. Make sure they're done. Number 3, make sure you load the tenants on correctly, because that's a real sort of like bugbear, and that's only going to get more regulated. If you're a letting agency, you need to be part of the property ombudsman, and if you're managing other people's. So again, make sure you get compliant in that relation, in that respect. And also follow the local council's guidelines when you're converting your HMOs, minimum room spaces, minimum amenity of spaces. It catches up with you eventually. Like, we've all seen it in the news where somebody has tried to squeeze many units in there. They've not been quite the size, or they've not been quite right. And the landlords and landladies get fined to an inch of their life. There are enough properties out there. Stop being cheap. Pay that little bit more. Get that bigger unit, because you're not doing this for a short period of time. If you're doing HMOs, then chances are you want to keep the asset forever. So buy in the right location, buy those bigger rooms. You'll pay a bit more and your ROI will be a bit less. But then that way you can ensure that you get higher rates of occupancy, because the market's only going to get more and more saturated as more people do this. And especially in areas like Birmingham, I can imagine now every man and his dog and lady is doing a HMO before Article 4 comes in. And those are the main rules of HMOs. You need your building regs, make sure your fire is up to scratch, your fire risk assessments, make sure you upload the tenants correctly, and also know if you're doing, if your house is a HMO. Most people don't understand the concept of a HMO. If you're renting to multiple people, it's a HMO. And in that case, you need to go from C3 to C4, even if it's a small one. And that's pretty much the main thing. Maintenance, ongoing maintenance issues. Everyone knows you need your gas safety cert every year, and your certificates need to get done every 6 months. Make sure you stay on top of that, because if you don't, the ramifications of you not will mean potentially you could have a tenant that you can't evict. Imagine a tenant stops paying because you didn't register the deposit, or because you didn't show them the EPC, or you didn't do anything right. A judge can then throw that out of court, and it's very, very difficult to sort of backtrack and redo all the stuff that you should have done on day one. So there's plenty of advice. Ask lots of questions when it comes to HMOs. You shouldn't be going into it 2 feet first. You should dip your toe in, learn the rules, and then slowly but surely become very competent at it. Another thing with HMO, have a house ruled, and like have a booklet that has loads of house rules. So you can just say, refer to the house rules, and have it written in your AST. So when someone breaks the house rules, so for example, we have no smoking in the rooms, guests are only allowed at weekends, etc. Quiet hours, before 8, after 11. Because if it's written in black and white, the house rules, you've got to abide by them, and it's in the AST, you can then use Section 8 to evict them if you've done your paperwork right. And setting yourself up for the worst case scenario will always result in less stress. Like, there are some real horror stories out there of people who've cut corners, like the thought of the short-term money rather than the long-term sort of stress-free managed property, because they haven't done their paperwork. They've just thought, it's fine, I can do this, I can do that. And then now with tenants that aren't paying, and potentially there's going to be higher costs. So make sure you do it right. And if you don't know, just drop us a line and I'll be able to spend a bit of time directing you where you need to look. Right, just a quick one, but it's really, really important. Lots of people aren't doing it right. And if you're doing a rent-to-rent, I'd really love to connect with you, because I would like to see how the model works when somebody who does it properly. And again, I'm going to call quite a lot of people out. I haven't met anyone who is doing it properly yet. Because most people I found of cutting corners or simply don't know, which again, if you're in charge of a property, it's just unexcusable. There's plenty of resources out there to use. So please, do get in touch. And thanks for your time.